The inheritance of traits that are governed by genes on sex chromosomes are further complicated by the fact that males and females don't have the same chromosome complement when it comes to sex chromosomes. The X chromosome is a large chromosome with thousands of genes along its length, and all of these genes are required in at least a single copy for survival. Now, these genes on the Y chromosome are fewer and not necessarily required for survival. They are required for maleness. There's a single region on the Y chromosome called the sex-determining region of Y, and it carries a gene for a protein called testes determining factor. And early in development, this gene is expressed, and as long as an individual is carrying a good Y chromosome with a good copy of this allele, or this region, then the secondary sex characteristics of a male are developing. Now, if you're missing a Y chromosome, then you develop as a female, and no matter what, every individual must have at least one X chromosome. There are traits governed by genes on the X chromosome that have nothing to do with sex determination. And so studying the inheritance of these traits is complicated. Males, of course, have an X and a Y, and then they have 44 autosomes, 2 copies of chromosomes 1 through 22. Females have also 44 autosomes and also have 2 X chromosomes. Now, remember, you can be female without a second X chromosome, or you could have a number of X chromosomes in addition to Y, and still be either male or female, depending on the presence of the Y chromosome. Gametes produced by males will have 22 autosomes and either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome because these act as homologous in meiosis. Gametes produced by a female will have 22 autosomes and an X chromosome because these 2 X chromosomes have the same order and type of genes along their length. They act as homologous, and one of the two will assort into a gamete. So the parent that determines male or female is going to be the dad. The dad can create half male, half female offspring, but every offspring will get an X chromosome from their mother. Eye color is an example of something that's controlled by a sex-linked gene. Sex-linked means X-linked, and the reason for that is because there just aren't very many genes found on the Y chromosome. If something is Y-linked, then it will be described as Y-linked, not sex-linked. So the term sex-linked means X-linked. This is a great microscopy photo of a fruit fly's eye, which is the common name for Drosophila. And those fruit flies you see buzzing around your kitchen should all have red eyes. This is the wild type, or most common in the wild, phenotype for fruit fly eyes. The mutant phenotype, one of many, is white-eyed. And you rarely see these in the wild, but certainly we see them in the lab in all kinds of different colored eyes on fruit flies in the lab. The gene is found on the X chromosome, and that's designated here by letter X with a superscript letter R. Red is dominant to white, and let's say we have a true breeding red-eyed female. She is homozygous dominant for red, and these 2 red alleles are shown on the X chromosome. This distinguishes this gene from one that's autosomal, where we didn't use an X. Now let's say we also have a true breeding white-eyed male. He is carrying the recessive allele on his X chromosome, but then we also indicate that he's got a Y chromosome, and these 2 are going to separate from each other in meiosis. When they do, some gametes will be carrying the recessive X-linked allele, and some will just be carrying Y, in addition to all the other haploid set of chromosomes. This female can only produce gametes with an X chromosome carrying the dominant allele. And so we have females that are red-eyed and males that are red-eyed. However, well, let's think, if this had been Mendel, mating pure breeding flies, he would have seen all red-eyed flies in the F1, and that actually fits his hypothesis. However, when he mated these two with each other, he should see a 3-to-1 ratio of red to white, and there shouldn't be any difference between the males and the females. He did see, Morgan, who actually worked out sex-linked genes, did see a 3-to-1 ratio. But notice that because this is sex-linked, the only wide-eyed flies were male. So this is different. Even though we saw the 3-to-1 ratio, when he looked at the sex of the flies, only males had white eyes. All of these females had red eyes, and then half of the males also had red eyes. That's when he took a pure breeding female and a pure breeding male, female with red eyes, male with white eyes. Now, when you take this heterozygous female and you mate her with a white-eyed male, notice the gamete formation from each parent, and we have half red eyes, the same between the two sexes, and half white eyes. So in this case, there is no distinction between the males and the females, but it depends on the chromosome combination in the parents. Sex-linked genes look different in a pedigree, especially sex-linked recessive genes, which is the only kind we talk about in this class. It's recessive, and so it does skip generations, but this is an example of a pedigree, well-studied pedigree in Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, his family. His wife, Alexandra, was a carrier of hemophilia, which is a sex-linked recessive disease. It was carried down through multiple generations until finally Alexandra gave the recessive X-linked allele to her son. You'll find that sex-linked recessive alleles are most common in males. So if in a pedigree a trait shows up more often in males than in females, it is most likely sex-linked. And then of course if it's skipping generations, it's recessive. So I have a couple questions for you. Go ahead and push pause on your video in a minute. I have a man who has hemophilia, and he marries a woman who does not have hemophilia, but whose brother has hemophilia. And Lydia's mother has hemophilia. So Lydia does not, her brother has it, and her mother has it. Can you determine whether or not Lydia's father has hemophilia? And when you do, explain your answer. Push pause and we'll get right to it in a minute. Lydia's father can't have hemophilia. Her mother is homozygous recessive, and so Lydia had to have gotten the recessive allele from her mom. That's the only thing her mom can give her. However, she's normal, so she's definitely heterozygous. I said in here that she's a non-hemophiliac. That means then that the other X had to come from her father, and so he does not have hemophilia. He only has one copy of the gene because he is a male and he must have the Y chromosome. Now, color blindness is also an X-linked recessive trait in humans. John and Kathy have normal vision, and Kathy gave birth to a colorblind daughter after 10 years of marriage. John filed for divorce, claiming he is not the father of the child because he doesn't have color blindness and neither does his wife. Is John justified in thinking that he is not the father of the child? Explain your answer. If Kathy had given birth to a colorblind son, would John be justified in thinking that he is not the father? Think about these two questions and see if you can come up with the answer for John. For the first example, colorblind daughter, John is justified in thinking that he is not the father of the child. He has to give his X-linked allele to his daughter. And he's normal, so he is giving his daughter a normal vision dominant allele. She shouldn't have color vision, no matter what Kathy is carrying. His daughters should all have normal vision because he has normal vision. John is justified. Now, if Kathy had given birth to a colorblind son, he's not justified. Just because they both don't have color blindness doesn't mean that Kathy isn't carrying it. So if John gives his son a Y chromosome, Kathy could give the X-linked recessive color blindness allele and could produce a colorblind son with John. And so he would not have justification for thinking that he is not the father. However, in the example that we gave first, the colorblind daughter, John is justified in thinking that he is not the father of the child.